I cannot name the person I discussed with. My discussion was about the possibility of raising $1 trillion US, right? And the answer that I got was from Temasek that that's not a problem at all. With Singapore's AAA financial, we can mobilize any amount of money. The only issue is, do we have enough people or capable people or trustworthy people who know how to use the money effectively? So this is the critical problem. So it boils down to the mindset problem. Unless we have a new generation of young people or older people who are capable of mobilizing capital and technology and working with the Southeast Asian counterparts, we are going to be a bit behind time. So this is the question, right? So the speakers that we have brought together, like for example, Mr. Balji, it would be very important for him to talk about how does the media, right, the newspapers, the electronic media and so on, how do we use the media to kind of reopen the Singaporean mind, right? It's really the issue is mind versus media, okay? Then we have Melvin Tan, who will be talking about the Swiss model, because one of the propositions we put forward in the last session is that Singapore's 5 community development councils should be turned into 5 local governments. That means there will be 5 HDBs, 5 URAs, 5 MOEs, and let them decide on their own what sort of policy they want to exercise, and let them compete with each other who can do better. And then I have Mr. Yee Jenn Jong, who is going to talk about at the grassroots level, at the operational level in the community, you know, what actually happens? How do you get people to come out of their shell and to think creatively? Then we have Swee Yong here, who is a real estate expert, right? He and I have, and together with Yeo Lam Kiong, has worked on a proposal about how we can change the financial model of the HDB, particularly for the young people, so that the young people don't get into a debt trap. Because once they are in the debt trap, right, they have to pay huge amounts of money to own their flat, right? They will be very afraid to do anything, right? And then of course we have who's the other person? Yeah, and also if Han Shi can join us and make some comments about the Hong Kong situation, that will be very, very helpful, Han Shi. Yeah. So thank you all very much. Please kick off with Balji.
Okay. So I think we let Melvin go first.
Melvin, can you do your section?
Okay, sure. So earlier, Professor Tay was sharing about the idea of splitting Singapore up and being managed to say about five state governments or municipalities.
5 different governments.
5 different governments. Okay, so there are a lot of details to go through actually when you want to do such a split. But first of all, let me go to what I found about while I'm examining the Switzerland political system. So these Swiss cantons. They are like states within countries that have their own state governments. So these countries are called federations. So I believe Professor Tay is suggesting something that basically we are going to be...
Sorry, Melvin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you?
Who is this?
Yeah. Okay. Let Balji.
Balji.
Melvin, you come back in later. Okay.
No problem.
After Balji. All right.
Sorry.
Prof was suggesting turning Singapore into a federation with 5 states. So interesting idea. Singapore was indeed part of a federation. As we know, we were part of the Federation of Malaysia. So would a Swiss model be feasible for Singapore? I would say that if Singapore was evolved into a federation, it's probably workable. But currently it is not. And given that it's a centralized government system, would it actually evolve into a federation that smoothly? There are a lot of details to go through. So I think that would be the challenge. In this case, they have their own state governments. So they also have their own legislatures, and of course they will have their own state elections apart from elections at the federal level. So for Switzerland, they have 26 cantons, a population of 8 million, it's quite close to Singapore, 9 million. It's thing to have that many provinces. So for such a system, as I said, it could be workable, but for system, what do you call that? It's going to be
Melvin, can I interrupt you just to kind of target the issue?
Sure.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. The reason why I propose the 5 independent governments in Singapore is not that I believe it will happen, okay?
Sure.
I'm making the argument that unless we open the minds of Singaporeans through having a situation where they can exercise direct democracy like in Switzerland, Singaporeans will never open their minds. So therefore, there is a need for a structural change in the nature of our government. I don't believe the government will do it at all, but I'm making the argument that the government should think about it.
No, I agree. I also don't think anyone believes that the current government would actually do it. But I do think that the key about the Switzerland system is that it's not only just democratic, it is also very inclusive because they use proportional representation at the federal level, at the canton level, and this system ensures that the legislatures will conform to the for the
You have to speak closer to the mic.
the proportional representations for Singapore's legislature. Okay, so in favor of if we were more legislatures and we
Sorry to interrupt, Melvin. Can you check the connection point of your mic to the computer?
Yeah, there's a lot of
I think there's a lot of feedback. It could be.
Yeah, as I was saying, the Switzerland system is quite inclusive. They have they use proportional representation, so they cover different voters. Voters are quite well represented in their legislature and also in their federal legislature. Whereas for Singapore, I think they're just basically polar opposites because Singapore believes in a dominant situation to achieve more efficiency, no arguments, no quarrel, no debate to move forward. So, or not say no, but little. And that if we were to have a legislature model like what we have first past the post at not only the so-called at the federal level, but also at state levels, is going to deeply politically polarize Singapore even more. So I think that definitely these are some of the things that, yeah, as what Prof said, we then have to consider and all that. So Singapore doesn't have any devolvement of what do you call that? These powers at state levels. The most they have is town councils, which is actually very different because town councils manage only HDB blocks and also manage only maintain. I would not even say manage, but maintain the condition of HDB blocks and all the lands linking HDB blocks. Singapore is generally still a very centralized system. So they have different government agencies overseeing other areas like transport, like hygiene, and things like that, healthcare. We're all centralized through the area. So I think that it's going to be quite a challenge. I mean, if, as what Prof said, if we were to have a more inclusive system, I think that we can perhaps we can cultivate a more participatory citizenry in terms of how the country is run and all that. But unfortunately, we are just like the other direction. And for that to happen, I think yes, the government definitely have to consider whether it wants to be very exclusive to the extent that it kind of shuns, the system kind of shuns people who do not support it. So then you are excluding a very big group of people, which is like the 40% of voters. I think definitely, yeah, there's something that we definitely have to look at. So that's all for me. So if you have any questions, feel free to bring up.
On the Swiss system, they have there are reports that every year each canton has about 4 referendums on all manner of issues which are of concern to the constituents of that canton. In the same way, I think that the 5 local governments in Singapore theoretically should have referendums on all key issues which affect people's lives. For example, the school system. The people of that area could decide what is the proportion of time the students should spend looking at books, and what proportion of the time should students spend doing CCA, for example, so that they develop other aspects of their capabilities, right? So these are the kind of referendum issues which may make a difference between one local government compared to another. So my point is that then the different local governments, the 5 different local governments, will be competing with each other so that they will improve their governance capability, right? Right now, there's no competition. It's a one party, one central system, and they do change and do make improvements, but it takes a hell of a long time before the feedback actually gets up to the top. So this is the problem of Singapore, right? We have developed Singapore so fast and so well, but the system is now reaching a state where it is kind of frozen, right? And my argument is that if we are going into a very difficult situation in the years ahead that we are going to face, as what the government calls, we are going to face headwinds, right? Then we better have our sails properly up, right? And how do we manage the future? This is the challenge that we must face.
Yeah, so I think what Professor is sharing is direct democracy, which is to vote on more policies rather than representative democracy, which is to basically just elect your legislature and your government. So yes, I think that there are more issues that can be brought to a referendum rather than issues only on sovereignty and things like that. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, in my write-up, I propose that there should be 5 HDBs. That means the local housing policy should be shaped by the local community, right? There should be 5 URAs. That means the whole physical planning of the area should be decided by the people themselves. And there should be 5 school policy. Okay, so these are the different kinds of issues which direct democracy should be brought to play to affect people's lives directly. And in that process will change and open up the Singaporean mindset so that they can be more capable of actually expanding beyond Singapore to build the new Southeast Asia and therefore the new Asia.
Okay, I'm just going to interject here because I think a lot of our listeners are not really familiar with the 3-part series that Prof covered, namely, is Singapore really independent? So I'm just going to give a brief overall overview of the 3 parts. Part 1 is talking about how the Western powers have actually come in to control not just Singapore but the region. Maybe Prof, you did explain the 3 parts much better than me. Why don't you go ahead, Prof? You talk about the 3-part series, part 1, part 2, part 3. What is it about?
Well, part 1 is actually very important for us to understand because after the Second World War, there was an agreement between Britain and United States that Britain will decolonize and the United States to take over the rest of the world. Okay, in contest with the Soviet Union. So that was the Cold War situation. Then, in order for Singapore to survive, Lee Kuan Yew worked very hard to have Singapore join Malaysia. And because he was too impatient to change the political system in Malaysia, Singapore was kicked out of Malaysia because it offended too many of the vested interests in Malaysia. As a result of which, Singapore became an island city-state by itself without any hinterland, right? And therefore, it became a pure servant of the Euro-American economic order. That means we have to obey them. We have to obey the West, right? But Lee Kuan Yew was very smart. He not only obeyed them, he also made hell of money out of them. And that is through the land. So he controlled 80%, PAP controlled 80% of the land, and therefore became very rich in the process. And in the process of controlling the land and the economy, in order to make sure that people do not become a nuisance to the foreign investor, he disciplined the society to such an extent that Singaporeans have become totally kiasi kiasu, right? And therefore, the brain of the Singaporean, the mind of the Singaporean is now stuck in a semi-frozen state, except for a few people like Yee Jenn Jong and the volunteers who are trying to do very things, but they are very small in numbers. The majority still continue to support the PAP government because there, as Swee Yong has put it, they are completely tied into their chain, their handcuff to the flat that they own, which is tied up with the CPF. So they dare not try anything. And that is the reason why, given that situation, we are now in the new stage of Singapore's history where we need radical change. We need fundamental change. Otherwise, we are going to be a very difficult situation caught between America and China. So unless we build up a stronger ability to work with the region, we are in trouble. Okay, and of course there are already new developments, right? The Johor Sultan made an approach to Singapore to consider setting up a new economic zone in Johor where Singapore will participate. That's fine. And the other major factor is that China is going to invest very heavily in Indonesia. Indonesia is already legislated under Jokowi's initiative, right, to control all the natural resources of Indonesia. So China is having to move into Indonesia. They need to use Indonesian natural resources. They need to use Indonesia's cheap labor as well. And this is why the prospect of a regional economic growth is on the cards. But unless Singaporeans know how to operationalize, how to work within this region, right? We can't even speak Malay properly. How are we going to work in the region, right? And our attitudes are all still very, very focused on small island city-state, right? All the conversations we hear are actually only about small issues regarding in relation to Singapore. Singaporeans must think beyond Singapore. We must think bigger, but we are not trained to think bigger. That's our problem. We are too small-minded. The island, what do you call it? The little red dot has got into our head, right? We should be thinking of ourselves as a much bigger red dot, not a small little red dot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So